All right. I have noticed in my daily conversations with our customers, with our paper customers, that the topic of climate change really has become a face through the Fridays for Future movement. So the kids going out on the street really has made this tangible for people. Before, it was very scientific. It felt detached from everyday life for a lot of people. My name is Stephanie Eichener. Thank you, Maria, for introducing me. I'm Sustainability Manager at UPM Communication Papers, and I welcome you to this presentation that I want to make very practical, hands-on, really for companies, how to tackle climate change in the news publishing industry. Giving some examples from our own company, from UPM Communication Papers, but not going into like products and this and that and the other about us, but really how we did it and how you might want to do it. Nowadays, we all know of heavy rainfalls, storms, droughts, and they are no longer theoretical. These are really everyday experiences for us. And the awareness for climate change is increasing. It is increasing with investors, it is increasing with consumers, and the nation states are responding to these risks from climate change as well. So just to give an example, the investors, the managers devising 50% of the global investment capital, they request urgent action from the governments. And trust me, they don't request that only from governments, but also from the companies they invest in. Or when we look at products. So a product that is branded as sustainable has shown a 5.6 times faster growth than a product that is not branded as a sustainable product. So here making a difference in the market. And then if the market side is not enough for you to convince you that you should be active, we have seen a 20 times increase in the number of climate change regulation from states worldwide in the last 10 to 13 years. So there is a lot of reason to be active, a lot of good reason. And being active is not only a necessity because of our natural environment, because of the way markets, investors, but also regulators are responding to it. It can also be very good business. I will share the presentation afterwards with you. There's a link to a Business Insider article on the top 10 benefits actually that a company can have from addressing this topic proactively. And there are ways to address it, and we do have reason for hope because there are institutions, there are scientists that are all looking into how can we tackle this as a company. And I have found a few examples from the newspaper publishing sector, how companies have become active. I did like an event that The Economist conducted a couple of weeks back, a climate risk virtual week, okay, not be kept home by COVID, just like we are here now, but get out, meet virtually and discuss how to measure, manage, and mitigate climate change. Or another example in the middle here, the German print house Meyer & Söhne has invested in technology that is reducing carbon emissions and has engaged in carbon compensation for climate neutral printing. And then also another opportunity, which is widely underutilized, I would say, which I show an example here from the Augsburger Stadtzeitung, which is the city newspaper in our UPM Communication Papers headquarter town in Augsburg in Germany, giving its printers room to present the climate-friendly printing and the climate-friendly production of a newspaper. This could obviously go even farther, that it's not just about supplier content, but it's editorial content researched by the journalists. So vastly underutilized, but a great opportunity to reach the interested reader. With that, I would like to encourage you to have a look at your screen where you see the discussion forum. And in this discussion forum, you can share, so not in the Q&A, but in the discussion forum for everybody to see and to think about what you have done as a company so far. And really only if you have done something. If not, leave it blank for now. I'll have another section for ideas later on. So please don't be shy. Tell us what you have done so we see more encouraging examples here. Well, we do that and we look at this in the end. I want to have a word on digital publishing, because that is a trend that many engage in to reduce costs from production, to reduce costs from transport, but many also claim to reduce the environmental impact. But that is something I really want to challenge. We all know that the recycling rate for paper in Europe is at an awesome 72%. The recycling rate for electronic waste is down at 35%. That's in Europe. Worldwide, it's down at 17%. And that all the while, the e-waste is the fastest growing fraction of waste worldwide. So paper is a very circular product. We have a very good handle, lots of experience on it. Electronics, not so much. I know that people really like to get numbers, like say, tell me what is the environmental footprint of reading my newspaper, and tell me, is reading it on paper better than reading it on my digital device? There is an answer, but it's not easy. The answer really is, it depends. So behavior counts a lot. But there are a few answers out there. I want to quote the HuffPost. It phrased it that way. Do you read the news more than 10 minutes each day? If so, the printed page is better for the planet than your digital screen. And most people indeed do read much more than 10 minutes the news a day. Or a second calculation done by the Bavarian State Ministry of the Environment said the following. In Germany, on average, 3 readers share 1 printed copy of a newspaper, making its environmental footprint superior to that of a digital version. The environmental footprint of a digital newspaper is only better for those 19% of readers who read their newspaper all by themselves, as I've said, which is not the standard in Germany. But if these readers, who read the news by themselves, print only 1 page from their digital device because they want to archive it or because they want to share it with someone, that effect is gone again, and the printed newspaper is the better environmental choice again. From our experience, it takes 2 levels to engage in if you want to move your business to becoming climate friendly. So first, you need to know your impact. You need to set it up so that you can plan for and execute the second step, which are the concrete actions. But one really has to follow the other to make sense. Interestingly, most companies see action as necessary, but even more interestingly, most companies haven't taken any action. And I think it's because it sounds great, but it's difficult. As Maria said, there are so many pressures to deal with. Business, reaching your customers, logistics, now COVID. When do you find the time to engage with this? Frankly, I have to say the time of the lockdown has been a very active time for companies to look into strategic issues, also environmental ones. So I did not receive fewer inquiries from our customers, but more. And I received less kind of day-to-day, can you send me this type of certificate kind of questions, but rather, when would you have time to discuss our long-term strategy, our plan for making our company more climate friendly? So it could actually be a good time where you do travel less, to invest in measuring your impact, setting your targets, and do some reporting on it. So set up your process. And then obviously, once you have set up your process, you can perform and you can report on it to be visible with your actions. And now it gets really very, very practical. So there are standards out there for companies that help them to calculate the carbon footprint. And a carbon footprint is not a carbon footprint. We have carbon footprint at the company level, and we have carbon footprint at the product or at the service level. And there are different standards covering that. And for the news publishing and the publishing sector in general, the product level standards PAS 2050 and ISO 14067 would be the standards of choice. For company level, really the world's most widely used greenhouse gas accounting standard is the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. It's structured around areas of influence. I'll go into that in a moment. And it's really suitable to any kind of company. The PAS and the ISO, they look specifically into products or products and services, and they go to the value chain and the life cycle of a product to assess it. But let's look into this, what is called here, the levels of influence and responsibility. What do I mean with that? And I'll show you an example from a paper mill. So envision a paper mill sitting here in the middle. And it has its operations around. It might produce some energy on site. There might be solar panels. There might be a biomass plant. There might be a gas-fueled plant that produces energy. That mill is purchasing electricity also from the market, some more, some less, depending on whether they produce their own. Then all kinds of inputs coming into that mill and all kinds of outputs going out of that mill. And if you want to start, I think it's not going to be very different for any other company in the producing sector, but you can adapt this also for service providers. This might look overwhelming, and it really is. That's why these areas of influence are so practical. So one of these areas is called scope, scope 1. Scope 1 addresses all the emissions that stem from production of energy on your own site, what I've just mentioned. Then scope 2, also very simple. It's all the emissions that stem from the electricity you purchase. And immediately you see how you can have an impact and how you can tackle this. Well, then there's still a lot left out there, right? Almost everything or a lot of what's outside of your direct energy needs is scope 3. So that's the energy needed for harvesting and transporting and converting your supplies that then to your operation. And then there are a few interesting areas like a sink of carbon in the forest or a sink of carbon in an archived product, or some areas of disposal that are not part of the greenhouse gas accounting scheme of the greenhouse gas protocol. Nevertheless, they have an impact, and there's lots of research currently into how these can be also encompassed and made fit this scheme scientifically. But my aim here is not to overwhelm you. I want to make it very practical. So let's look at it from a very practical point of view. I would suggest anybody who wants to engage at this, look at their operations at a company level, look at scope 1, what energy am I producing on site? And look at scope 2, what energy am I purchasing? That's really the basic to start, and you can only start and not look at anything else, or you say, what are my most relevant scope 3 emissions? I don't want to leave them out now. For us, it would be wood and recycled fiber coming in and the transport and converting associated with it. For you, it might probably be paper or inks or some other resources. So this is a very practical approach, how to get started, how not to get discouraged, but get going and look at your areas of impact. For a product carbon footprint, it's a little bit different. You decide on a product first, you set the objectives that you want to achieve in terms of reductions, and then you start calculating. There are good guidelines in the standards, the PAS and the ISO, how to build a process map, how to check the boundaries, how to check for uncertainties. And I want to stress that because uncertainties are just a reality, right? You will encounter uncertainties. You will encounter moments where there's no data available. What do? You will have to make your best assumptions, and the standard is giving guidance on how to do that. So that is actually very typical, and that's why it's also difficult or dangerous to compare product carbon footprints, because you need to know the assumptions that have been made in calculating them. But then once you have done that, you can start actions, you can start reducing emissions, and you can start attaching claims to your products and communicating the footprint. And when you have done this exercise, either for your company or for the product, there will be areas of highest impact. And most likely, I have added a few, but don't be shy, use the discussion field again to add if you can think of any other. It will be energy sourcing, it will be efficient energy use, renewable raw materials, recyclability, and a look into the value chain, depending on how deep you want to look in the beginning. So for energy, producing low or no carbon energy on site, purchasing low or no carbon energy from the market are options that companies can engage in, some easier than others. It depends where you're located at in the world. It depends what your means are on your site, how you may be locked in some past investment that is determining your energy provision for the time being. But then there's efficient energy use, right? Process innovations, energy savings technologies, energy saving lighting, all the things that you can think of that you do to improve the efficiency of your processes. Then there is, of course, the ability to substitute materials that are fossil-based with renewable ones and then keep them in the recycling loop. I think the renewable materials and the recyclability are really tightly together, because you have a renewable material. I mean, the moment it gets broken down and decays and gets into the waste, for example, that carbon is released again. So you need to either store it or you need to keep it in the loop to ensure that. And for paper, it's easy. The paper is been recyclable for 100 years. The papers nowadays are all tested for recyclability. What's sometimes a problem are inks and varnishes. We experience that in our recycling processes. So that's really for the creative heads out there, for the developers. I think a good look is very important. The product needs to appeal to the reader, but not to the point where then it cannot be properly recycled. So we have to think with the circular economy in mind when we create beautiful and appealing products. And a few steps in the value chain, also something that we at UPM try to help our customers with, that is lightweight papers lead less emissions in transport, papers with high runnability, so they don't clog up your machines, carbon neutral papers or transport solutions together with your customer, with your supplier, maybe even with your customer. Also, subscription schemes might be something. Okay, how can I get my newspaper to the end consumer without the inefficient end consumer travel to some store, for example, or any permutation of that. So you're not working on this alone. You work on this with your downstream and upstream value chain. So if you haven't done so, please tell me what you think of would be other actions. Maybe I've been missing something. Okay, I'm in a paper company. I'm not in the news publishing company. I'm not a printer, not a publisher. So maybe I forgot something here, but I would be interested to hear, because we sat together here and looked for examples. But it's always better to hear firsthand from you. And while you do that, I want to show you on a practical example how we at UPM chose to do it. So we looked at the standards and we chose for the company level accounting the greenhouse gas protocol. And for the product level, the so-called SEPI 10 toes. 10 toes because it's a footprint, right? It's like playing with that imagery. It's a framework for the paper and board industry to do carbon accounting. And once we had evaluated our impact by the standards, we set targets. And the targets we didn't just set out in the blue, we aligned them with the community of other businesses in the United Nations business ambition for 1.5 degrees. So 1.5 degrees being the level of warming that we want to stay under. We don't want the planet to get any hotter than that. It's going to get warmer anyway already. So we're not going to completely stop that. But maybe we can limit it to 1.5 degrees as agreed in Paris at the United Nations. So for us, that means a 65% reduction of carbon emissions until 2030. And the methods that we chose to achieve that and the target that we set this way, we had verified externally, because it's one thing to set a target that sounds great, and it's another whether that target is really doing its bit to achieve that 1.5 degree target. And that's what the science-based initiative is doing for companies. So once you have your goals in place, it might be interesting for you to align them with that. So we all are on one common route. And then we started investing, okay? We started investing in our different mills. We started in on-site production, scope 2, scope 1, if you remember. Also in scope 2, a wind power purchase agreement for the next 25 to 30 years to purchase green energy. We've invested in sea transport vessels that are more efficient than the ones used in the past. And all of that will help us to reduce our emissions by 700 tons annually. And that's just the investments announced in the last 2 years, okay? There is more to come, obviously. And once you have your action in place, they will speak for themselves, right? So, for example, the carbon disclosure projects honored our efforts with A awards in the section of climate, but also forests and water. Or the Dow Jones Sustainability Indices. You don't choose whether you're in it, right? You don't choose. The moment you have a certain size as a company, you're in it and you are being ranked. And we have been ranked industry leader in the European and in the world indices in the forest and paper sector. So that's what you can achieve if you set up properly. And then obviously it helps you communicating about this. With that, I think we have a few moments left for questions. There's always a possibility, I will provide the slides, I thought these questions, to contact me afterwards, or contact me through WAN-IFRA, or contact me, as I said here, on LinkedIn, where we can keep the conversation up. So let me have a look at the questions. Published a difference in carbon neutrality for their paper qualities. Okay, I'm not certain what, there's a question that says, do we publish the difference in carbon neutrality for our papers? Not entirely sure what that means. We do offer carbon neutral paper, and we do offer paper and carbon profiles that are publicly available where you can see, the carbon footprint. So we do offer that. It looks like, yes, of course, I guess reducing chemicals and inks in printing will make recycling simpler, but it's not to say that you cannot use inks, right? And chemicals, they give the material a good look and feel, but they have to be made the right way so that they can be recycled, and that's possible also from natural resources. Future of climate action, recycling is part of that action. Virgin news will fall in the future. I think there is a place for both. I think it totally depends on where you are located and how available the recycled fiber is. When you're located in a place where there is a lot available, then obviously the recycled fiber is your choice to go. But if that needs to be transported a long distance, that's adding to the environmental footprint, then why not add wood chips to it, for example, that you have available from a nearby sawmill. Paper fiber can be recycled a lot. So the figures vary. In the past, it was said it's about 7 times. Now there are studies out that say about 20 times. So the fiber itself is rather stable and quite suitable for a long recycling cycle, for a very consistent cycle. It's usually the inks and varnishes and glues added to it that always drag some of the fiber out in the process of recycling. And obviously you can get a copy of my slides. There is a question here as well. Is in-house paper recycling the way forward? Well, for UPM, it certainly is. We do most of our recycling in-house. I'm not sure that's exactly what you mean. If we do. Okay, I think there are some examples actually on there that are not questions, but they're examples from what people have been doing. Okay, and what is the need of the hour for companies to engage in newspaper printing? Well, I think it is, Kumar, thank you for the question. I think it is to set up your company to address these challenges. You know, it's not to say we're not going to print newspapers anymore, because people need information, right? People need a secure source of information, and it's also a question of justice and of accessibility. While a lot of people have access, not everybody does have access to digital devices. So don't drop newspaper printing, right? But set your company up so that it can be done in a climate-friendly way.
Stephanie, I'm going to jump in because we're running out of time. But on behalf of WAN-IFRA, I would like to thank you. It was a brilliant session. I think everybody agrees. It's such a common place to say paper is bad for the environment while completely ignoring the growing of e-waste, and very interesting to see how UPM is committed to tackle the carbon footprint. It was a lovely, lovely session. We have to wrap it up now, unfortunately, but if you have questions for Stephanie, you can find her in the meeting hub. You can connect through the platform, and I'm sure she will be very happy to connect with you and answer all the questions. So thank you so much for your time. We have another session starting now at 4 p.m., our executive roundtable. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Bye-bye.